students, today I will be talking on ecosystem. I think you will all agree that our Earth is a beautiful planet with diverse flora and fauna. Climatic conditions and geographical features are also different in different parts of the globe. Now, how is this diversity possible is exactly what we are going to study today. The first and foremost question that comes to our mind is, what is an ecosystem? Ecosystem means interaction of community of living organisms, that is plants, animals and microorganisms living in a particular area with each other and also with the physical components like the water, sunlight, temperature, soil, precipitation, atmosphere, rocks, minerals, etc. of that area. I hope students, you know that the living component of an ecosystem is called the biotic factor, while the non-living component is the abiotic factor. Dear students, I have just told you the meaning of an ecosystem, but do you know who coined the word ecosystem? It was Sir Arthur George Daneley, a British botanist who coined the word ecosystem at the beginning of the 20th century. Now, continuing with the concept of ecosystem, an ecosystem can either be natural or it can be man-made. A natural ecosystem again can be an aquatic one or a terrestrial one. The aquatic ecosystem means ponds, lakes, rivers, oceans, estuaries, wetlands and so on. The terrestrial ones are forests, grasslands and deserts. Man-made ecosystems are the gardens, aquarium and crop fields. I am sure you are aware that the interaction of the biotic and abiotic factors result in a physical structure of a particular type of an ecosystem, whereas the different types of plants and animal species present in an ecosystem tells us about the species component of an ecosystem. Now, distribution of these different species occupying the different levels in an ecosystem is called stratification. The stratification can either be vertical or it can be horizontal. Let us understand this concept by studying the vertical stratification in a forest. Vertical stratification means dividing the vertical structure of the forest into different layers or sections. The vertical stratification in a forest depends on the amount of light, temperature, soil type and rainfall that the different strata receive. Let me now explain vertical stratification a little more in details. I have just told you that the forest is divided vertically into different layers. So, what are these different layers? The different layers in a vertical structure of a forest are emergent layer, forest canopy, shrub layer, ground layer or the forest floor. Let me talk about each layer one by one. As you can see in the figure, the first layer is the emergent layer, which has tall trees reaching a height of about 70 to 80 meters. Woody climbers and epiphytes are also found in this layer. Emergent layer is present in the tropical rainforests, but is absent in the temperate rainforests. Next is the forest canopy, which is a continuous layer consisting of a canopy of trees. This layer is always exposed to sunlight. The trees of this layer bear fruits and flowers. However, these trees have to tolerate the heavy winds and high humidity. This layer is found both in tropical and temperate rainforest. As you can see in the figure, the maximum height of the trees of the canopy layer in tropical rainforest is about 60 meters. Average is roughly from 10 to 25 meters, while in temperate forests, the height of the trees of this strata is 90 meters. Forest canopy blocks most of the light from penetrating through it. Also, the canopy layer modifies moisture conditions for the very short trees and shrubs growing beneath the forest canopy. The last is the ground layer or the forest floor, which includes the soil and the underground roots, as you can see in the figure. Obviously, the animals will be affected by this stratification of plant life. Although the animals can move from one strata to the other, they prefer to remain in one strata for foraging, breeding and other activities. Thus, we see that there are different plant and animal species present in the various layers. These plants and animals differ from each other in size, behavior and feeding habit in different layers, which reduces the interspecific competition. So, what do you think is the importance of stratification? Well, one is it provides number of habitats for various organisms, and two, it minimizes interspecific competition. Now, let us study the various components of an ecosystem in an integrated manner and see how the flow of energy takes place within these components of an ecosystem. The various components of an ecosystem actually function as a unit. Now, let us see what are the major components of an ecosystem. The major components of an ecosystem are productivity, decomposition, nutrient cycling and energy flow. Let me explain each one of them. The first one is productivity. What do we mean by productivity? Productivity simply means rate of biomass production, or we can say that it is the amount of organic matter accumulated by the producers. It is expressed as unit of mass per unit area per unit time. As you can see here, productivity can be mathematically written as gram per square meter per day. Now, productivity can be of two types, primary productivity or secondary productivity. Again, primary productivity can be net primary productivity or gross primary productivity. Similarly, secondary productivity can be net secondary productivity or gross secondary productivity. Let us further study the difference between gross primary productivity and net primary productivity. Now, gross primary productivity is the total amount of organic matter produced by plants in an ecosystem during the process of photosynthesis. As you can see here in the figure, a considerable amount of the gross primary productivity is used by the plants in respiration, let us say capital R, and is lost as heat. So, net primary productivity or NPP of an ecosystem is the gross production minus the organic matter expended by the plants, or we can say lost by the plants in the form of heat. Thus, mathematically GPP minus R is net primary productivity. Do you know, students, that the annual net primary productivity of the whole biosphere is approximately 170 billion tons by dry weight of organic matter. Of this, the productivity of the oceans are only 55 billion tons. Rest is on land. As you can see in the figure, the net primary productivity is the available biomass for the heterotrophs. Obviously, these heterotrophs will produce new organic matter, and this is what is known as secondary productivity. The total amount of organic matter produced by the heterotroph is known as gross secondary productivity. Again, a considerable amount of this gross secondary productivity is used by the heterotroph for various metabolic activities, and some of it is lost as heat during cell respiration, as you can see in the figure. So, net secondary productivity is the gross secondary productivity minus the organic matter expended by the heterotrophs. Now, can you list the factors that are responsible for primary productivity? Well, the first thing that comes to our mind is the environmental factor. Photosynthesizing capacity of plants, availability of nutrients, and the plant species inhabiting that area are some of the other factors which are responsible for primary productivity. So, now we know that the energy captured by the plants from the sun flows through different organisms of an ecosystem. We also know that all organisms are directly or indirectly dependent on the plants, that is the producers, for food. So, the energy flow is unidirectional, that is, you can see from the sun goes to the producers and from the producers to the consumers. Let us understand more about this energy flow. But before that, let us recall the various biotic components of an ecosystem. As you can see in the figure, the plants are the producers and occupy the first trophic level. All other organisms are directly or indirectly dependent on plants for food. These are called heterotrophs or consumers. If these consumers feed directly on the plants, they are known as primary consumers. These are the herbivores and they occupy the second trophic level. You can see here. Some of the examples of herbivores are cows, goats, grasshoppers, etc. The animals that feed on the herbivores are called secondary consumers or primary carnivores and occupy the third trophic level. Some of the examples of secondary consumers are birds, fishes, wolf, etc. Similarly, there can be tertiary consumers or secondary carnivores which occupy the fourth or the last trophic level and feed on primary carnivores. They are also known as top carnivores. Example, of course, one is human and the other is lion, and there are many more. Generally, there are 4 trophic levels, but there can be also a fifth one. Now, what is a simple grazing food chain then? A simple grazing food chain will include the producers, which are the plants, the primary consumers, which are goat, cows, etc., and the secondary consumers, the lion, tiger, and so on and so forth. But what happens to the plant or the animal body after its death? You must have observed the leaves, when they fall down from the trees or any plant, they become dry, brownish in color and somewhat brittle. Can you think of a possible reason? Well, some of you must be right. This is because they have started to decompose and decay. Similarly, after the death of an animal, the body starts to rot and a foul smell comes out. Sometimes you can see maggots. Maggots are housefly larvae feeding on the carcass. So, what I am trying to tell you is that after the death of any living organism, the decomposition process starts. The dead roots and leaves, the dead bark, dead remains of animals including their feces constitute the detritus. As you can see in the figure, detritus is the raw material for decomposition. These detritus are then processed and broken down by decomposers and saprophytes. In order to study the component of an ecosystem, namely nutrient cycling, we must understand the process of decomposition. Now, decomposition includes leaching, catabolism, fragmentation, humification and mineralization. But the first step in the process of decomposition is fragmentation. Fragmentation is the breakdown of detritus by the detritivores. Now, these fragmented particles may contain a lot of inorganic water soluble nutrients. These nutrients dissolve in water, seep into the soil and get leached. Once the inorganic nutrients are removed, the simple organic matter is acted upon by the extracellular enzymes produced by the bacteria and fungi, that is the microorganisms, to form carbon dioxide, water and other nutrients which are reused by the producers. Now, this is catabolism. During the process of decomposition, a dark colored amorphous substance called humus is also formed, which undergoes slow decomposition as it is resistant to the microbial action. Humus is a reservoir of nutrients. This formation and accumulation of humus is called humification. The final step in the process of decomposition is mineralization. Mineralization is the process of degradation of humus to release the inorganic nutrients. Thus, the decomposers play a very important role in maintaining the dynamics of the ecosystem. In natural conditions, the rate of decomposition of detritus depends on two factors. One is the environmental conditions and two is the quality of detritus. Now, what are the ideal environmental conditions for decomposition of detritus? The first one is temperature. A temperature of more than 25 degrees centigrade under moist conditions is ideal. At a low temperature, say below 10 degrees centigrade, even if the moisture content is high, decomposition will take several years. That is why decomposition is very slow at high altitudes. Similarly, in deserts where the temperature is high but moisture is low, it takes a very long time for the detritus to decompose. The second factor is the quality of detritus. Even if the climatic conditions are ideal, decomposition takes place at a slower rate if the detritus is rich in lignin and chitin. The nitrogen-rich detritus, on the other hand, having low amounts of lignin, decompose relatively rapidly. Detritus rich in water-soluble substances like sugar, they also decompose rapidly. Thus, the overall rate of decomposition of detritus in natural conditions depends upon the combined effect of the environmental conditions and the quality of the detritus. Let us now study the fourth component of an ecosystem, which is energy flow. As you can see in the figure, plants and other autotrophs get energy from the sun to prepare food, but only 50% of the solar radiation is photosynthetically active radiation, and it is referred to as PAR, capital P, capital A, capital R, as you can see here. You will be surprised to know that plants capture only 2 to 10% of this photosynthetically active radiation, which is sufficient to sustain the entire living world. It is very evident from the figure here that only 10% of the energy is passed from one trophic level to the next trophic level. The remaining 90% of the energy is used for various metabolic processes of the organism or is lost as heat at each trophic level. This is the reason why there are generally only 4 trophic levels. There is no sufficient energy left for the 5th one. So, there is possibility to have a 5th trophic level, but maximum in normal cases you have only 4 trophic levels. Thus, we find here that the transfer of energy follows the 10% law. That is, only 10% of the energy is transferred to each higher trophic level from the lower trophic level. The relationship between the various trophic levels can be expressed in terms of numbers, biomass or energy. Students, I hope you know that trophic levels in an ecosystem can be graphically represented by an ecological pyramid. It was Charles Elton who developed this concept of ecological pyramids. So, the ecological pyramids are of three types: pyramid of numbers, pyramid of biomass and pyramid of energy. Let me tell you a little more in details about the various types of pyramids. The first one is pyramid of numbers. Pyramid of numbers represent the total number of individuals of different species at each trophic level. As we can see in the figure, the number of individuals are decreasing from lower trophic level to higher trophic level. The producers occupy the first trophic level and the number is roughly around 6 million, whereas the number of top carnivores, as you can see, is only 3. This type of upright pyramid is found in aquatic and grassland ecosystem. However, in a forest ecosystem, the pyramid of number is spindle shaped. The producers are less in number and form a narrow base. They support a greater number of herbivores. The primary consumers, which form a broad middle layer, foxes, snakes and lizard, which are secondary consumers, are lesser in number than the herbivores, and the tertiary consumers like lions, tigers, etc. are still less in number. There can also be an inverted pyramid of numbers, as is found in a parasitic food chain, as you can see in the figure here. Next is the pyramid of biomass. But first of all, you must understand what is biomass. Each trophic level has a certain mass of living material at a particular time, and this is called as standing crop. The standing crop is measured as the total mass of living organism, which is biomass, at each trophic level. Biomass is the dry mass, which is measured in kilogram per square meter. It can be calculated by collecting all the organisms at each trophic level separately and measuring their dry weight. As you can see in the figure, the pyramid of biomass is upright in a terrestrial ecosystem and inverted in an aquatic ecosystem. By studying the figure itself, you can understand why is it so. However, note one thing, that in an aquatic ecosystem, although the producers are more in number, their biomass is less than the zooplanktons, the small fishes, the large fishes and so on. The last is the pyramid of energy. Pyramid of energy is the amount of energy that flows into each trophic level and is always upright. As we move from one trophic level to the next trophic level, the amount of energy decreases. I have just explained this concept while explaining the energy flow in an ecosystem. As you can see in this diagram, how the energy flow is decreasing from the producer level to the tertiary consumer, and at each step the energy is lost as heat. But students, there are certain limitations of ecological pyramids. It does not take into account the same species belonging to 2 or more trophic levels. It takes into account a simple food chain, but we know that a simple food chain almost never exists in nature. Ecological pyramid does not take into account a food web. Saprophytes are not given any place in ecological pyramids, even though they play a vital role in the ecosystem, as we have just done when we were discussing about the decomposition process. To summarize what all we have learned today, let me take the example of the pond ecosystem. A pond ecosystem is a self-sufficient and self-regulating ecosystem. As you can see in the figure, the abiotic component of a pond is the water with all the dissolved inorganic and organic substances. The rich soil deposit at the bottom also constitutes the abiotic component. The solar radiation, temperature, day length and other climatic conditions regulate the rate of function of the pond. The phytoplanktons, some algae and the floating, submerged and marginal plants found at the edges of the pond are the autotrophs. The consumers are the zooplanktons. The free swimming and bottom dwelling forms like the fishes, the tadpoles, shrimps, etc. Decomposers are the fungi, bacteria and flagellate, especially abundant at the bottom of the pond. This system performs all the functions of any ecosystem and of the biosphere as a whole, that is, conversion of inorganic material into organic material with the help of radiant energy of the sun by the autotrophs, consumption of the autotrophs by heterotrophs, decomposition and mineralization of the dead matter to release them back for reuse by the autotrophs. There is unidirectional movement of energy towards the higher trophic levels and its dissipation and loss as heat to the environment. It must be now quite clear to you that the true processes, namely energy flow and cycling of nutrients, is simultaneously taking place in any ecosystem, that is from the sun, producers, and at each trophic level the energy is lost in the form of heat, as is evident in this figure. You have also learned that the various trophic levels can be expressed in terms of numbers, biomass or energy. So that we have three types of pyramids, namely pyramid of numbers, pyramid of biomass and pyramid of energy. Now you also know that pyramid of number can either be upright, spindle shaped or inverted depending on the type of ecosystem. Pyramid of biomass can either be inverted or it can be upright again depending on the ecosystem. Pyramid of energy, however, is always upright and the energy flow is unidirectional. Thank you, students.